Shit. Hey, remember last time we talked about Huawei?
Yes.
It hasn't gone away.
No, it hasn't gotten away. Someone just got arrested yesterday.
2 people.
Yeah.
2 people. So backstory, fascinating. This is fascinating. So this is an area I could definitely disappear down to. Chinese espionage, right?
Yeah.
They're going on forever. I say, I talk about there's certain things that the current administration is doing that I like. One of them is the way that they're dealing with China right now. And yes, the trade issue is buffeting the market somewhat and causing some instability. But again, the previous administration, the Bush administration, Clinton administration, lots of former presidents, they all acknowledged that China, privately, was not a fair trading partner. This administration is at least trying to call them out and calling them out on the cyber issue too, on their theft of intellectual property. So anyway, Huawei, supposedly owned by the founder and however many employees. I think that Huawei is, by the way, the number 1 telecommunications equipment manufacturer in the world, and they're the number 2 seller of smartphones. Right? They're a bigger seller of smartphones than Apple. So it's Samsung, Huawei, Apple for this. And so supposedly the company's owned by the founder, and his daughter is the chief operating officer, chief financial officer, one of those. She was arrested up in Canada. And she was arrested at the request of the U.S. She's up there on bail right now, waiting extradition hearing. And the reason was because supposedly she lied about Huawei's dealings with Iran, and they were busting sanctions by dealing and providing certain types of equipment to Iran. Now, this past week, we've had a Huawei employee who's now been fired by Huawei in Poland arrested for espionage. And along with him is a member of the Polish intelligence service, right, who retired and was now working for a French telecommunications company, but was arrested also for espionage related to Huawei and related to this individual who, up until just recently, was working for Huawei. Huawei claims innocence and says, well, we have no idea. And the founder just came out and gave this big speech and said, I would never let the Chinese authorities tell me what to do, and I would certainly never spy on anybody using Huawei's capabilities and technology. And people are probably thinking, what the fuck are you talking about this for? Huawei embeds their telecommunications equipment throughout the world, right? So it's in our allies' military operations, which then are connected to ours, right, in terms of communications and transfer of intelligence and information. They're everywhere. And they chose Poland. They've been in Poland for about 10 years. Poland is a very important NATO ally. So I'm taking a long time, I realize, to explain this. But what I'm trying to say is nothing happens by happenstance, right? The Chinese don't operate that way. So the Chinese authorities some time ago, years ago, looked at it and went, yeah, this makes sense, right? We've got Huawei, which, by the way, the founder is a former military People's Liberation Army engineer. They looked at this and they thought, Poland, that would be a good beachhead for us, right? Because they're a key element of NATO. So let's go to Poland. So they started burrowing into Poland, striking deals, and they're basically the most important foreign relationship now, corporation inside of Poland, and they're fully embedded. And they've had access to, at this point, to NATO communications, and now the arrest of these 2 individuals. And people will still, despite this, and despite their past, despite their theft of information from everybody from U.S. Steel to Alcoa to Lockheed Martin to DuPont, all the times that they've been stealing information, people will still go, well, I don't believe it. That doesn't make any sense. I don't see why the Chinese would act that way, and I don't see why we're being so harsh on them. This tariff thing is a bad idea. My point being, you got to call them out. They're not going to necessarily change their behavior, but you got to raise public awareness, make our allies understand, and that's what we're doing right now. We're saying you got to put the brakes on this. Build a firewall. Use other companies' telecommunications equipment, right? Because the fact that we're tied in with our allies, with Poland and with Canada and with us, that gives them access to us.
So for someone on the outside like myself who's trying to look at this, and you say that Huawei is stealing stuff, stealing stuff from U.S. Steel, how are they doing that?
Well, The U.S. Steel, admittedly, that was a PLA, that was a People's Liberation Army Third Department operation against DuPont and also against U.S. Steel and others. So that was a little bit different. I conflated the two. But Huawei, one of the things that they do is by having access and embedding their equipment in your communications infrastructure, that gives them the ability then to, in a simple way, to tap in. Right?
Intercept packets.
Intercept information, right, basically. Okay. So you have communications. Imagine we're trading information through NATO channels, right? All they need is that one in, right? It's like everything else. It's like phishing, right? It's just like, when hackers, just an individual hacker sitting in somebody's basement, he just needs that one avenue. He needs to get one, just click on that email. That gives me the pathway in. So when Huawei is able to embed their technology into Polish communications, and we're now connected because of our NATO alliance, that gives them access to us, to France, to Germany, whomever. And it's not as if it just happened. It's not as if Huawei, from a business perspective, said, I bet we could sell some of our equipment in Poland. Wouldn't that be good? The guy who was arrested, the Huawei person who was arrested, was responsible for the provision of telecommunications equipment to government facilities. That was his job. Mm. And the Polish guy, one of his last jobs with the Intel service was communications. So I guess what I'm saying is none of this shit happens in a bubble. And it's all very well mapped out. The Chinese have a very long view on things, and they are very good at developing operations like this. And so they've been very successful. So we'll see, but I'm glad that the current administration, at least, is calling them out. I don't believe it's necessarily going to change their behavior, and we'll probably get some sort of deal where they'll claim to look. Just a couple of years ago, they agreed with President Obama to stop their cyber shenanigans, and they didn't. So they just changed the way that they did it. That's the world we live in, but I think it is important to make a stand, right?
Yeah, some of the tech people are saying that they think it's preposterous when they were talking about the ban on Android phones. Some of the tech people say that doesn't make any sense. But what you're saying is it goes far beyond the actual phones itself, and it's really the mission of the actual company itself.
Yeah, I'm saying that there is no way that Huawei and other important Chinese companies are solely privately owned and or have the ability to tell the Chinese authorities that they will not spy on their behalf.
It's just not happening.
It's just not happening. You have to go a long ways to come up with that sort of naive viewpoint that says that a Chinese company is going to put its foot down and tell President Xi, absolutely not. We will not do anything to harm another nation's company. Horseshit. They've spent generations now, decades, jump-starting their industry and moving up the food chain on the global economy by hoovering up everything possible out there.
So if someone like a tech wizard got a hold of one of their routers, have they been able to detect something in there that doesn't belong, or some sort of a backdoor, or some sort of a way that they could tap in? It's like if you were you were Apple and you were sending, data to Raytheon or whatever, and you're going back and forth, they could tap in through that. Has it been proven that there's a device like that?
Yeah, a former NSA director, McConnell, back in 2015, I think early 2015, came out, and NSA came out with an official statement, and it said every major U.S. corporation of any consequence has been attacked and exploited by the Chinese, and we have never, ever not found Chinese malware within their systems.
Wow.
That was
never.
4 years, going on 4 years ago.
Malware being software, right?
Right.
Is there anything in the hardware itself?
Yes, in a sense that, yes, in the sense of like, trying to remember the name of it, but not doing a very good job. If you have access to or understanding of physical hardware, then you can affect easier. You can affect physical control of systems, right? So Stuxnet, I don't know if you remember, Stuxnet was
I do, but if you could explain it to
it was an attack on Iran.
To shut down their nuclear program, right?
Right, exactly. To essentially what it did was it took over control of some centrifuges, overspun them, they heated them up, broke.
And it was a virus.
And
correct?
it was
An
a piece of
engineered-
software that was able to impact the physical equipment. It took control of those systems because, in part, whoever perpetrated it had much better understanding of that gear, right, or had access to that gear. And that's an important part of this, and it's happened several times since then. And I'm not disclosing anything because it's been written about. I'm sure it'll be a movie at some point. But that's a concern. I'm far more worried about a company like Huawei with its integration into our allies, telecommunications systems than I am about sort of the individual sale of phones and what that means. Look, Amazon and all the others are gathering more data on the average American than the U.S. government or anybody else's government is doing at this point.